Hello and welcome to Cloud Insiders, the podcast that brings cloud down to earth. Welcome to this VMworld Europe special. In this podcast, we catch up with Xtravirt consultants Curtis Brown and Simon Eady, who are both back from Barcelona and VMworld Europe, and here are their highlights. Thank you both for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi,
so,
thanks, yeah.
What were your highlights then, other than the alcohol?
Well, we're professionals. We don't do such things like alcohol. But I obviously put a bit of a focus, given my EUC background, on some of the EUC sessions. So looking at things like the Horizon Cloud on Azure, that was quite a fascinating one, for example. But there are other areas around that as well, particularly some focus on Horizon with VMware NSX. So quite a bit of coverage on that. And also some quite interesting stuff around the end user side of matters. So the VMware Workstation, VMware Fusion side, there's new releases of those imminent as well. So quite an array of end user compute stuff, often something that tends to get overlooked.
Cool. Simon, what about yours?
Highlights, quite a few actually. It was a little bit different for me. I hadn't been for a couple of years. So in terms of sort of sessions or activities, I went to the hackathon on the Monday night, which was really, really good. Never been to one of those before. So it was great to meet a lot of people, plus learn some stuff while doing stuff. So that was good. The partner exchange as well that day did, I think, one or two sessions there. Obviously, one of the things that I enjoy is VROPS. So went along to a session with some TAM customers, which was invited to. That was fun to sort of share with those guys. On the Tuesday, went along to E1 session on I always struggle saying this, but operationalize your world using VROPS. And that's an excellent session. So if there's anyone that really wants to use VROPS in a really new way, I suppose, or getting more value from it from very much a business perspective, thinking of customers, your users as customers, then that's a great session to check out when the recording's released. There were a few other sessions that I jumped along to as well. There was some VRA pieces, VVD sessions. I was very much interested in picking up information on Power CLI. So in terms of highlights, there were many. Certainly one of the best parts for me about VMworld is also the networking piece, about meeting my peers. So meeting sort of people who I knew on Twitter or in the community, but also getting to meet new people. So yeah, big thumbs up. It was great.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was just going to say similar sort of thing in terms of the networking side. Yeah, particularly valuable, both meeting customers as well as contacting VMware and with partners, and just the genuine sort of enthusiasts. There's a lot of techies there. You kind of pick up hints and tips and just that sort of sharing experiences. Really good session, really good sort of chat.
Yeah, I did see quite a few tweets actually, because I was keeping track of it from here, around it being sort of the best VMworld that they've had for quite a long time. Would you guys agree?
From a keynote point of view, it was pretty good, but I don't think it was quite as epic as last year. But in terms of the rest of the stuff, certainly for me, yeah, definitely the best one I've been to so far. Yeah,
I think that's fair. I think although there are a few elements that were mildly revolutionary, but no real standout aspect in that sense. But you can tell there's a vibe of a lot of things that are coming, a lot of things that are imminent, that are either not quite ready to be announced, but certainly on the horizon.
Cool. Okay, so I suppose building on the highlights piece, given each of your individual areas of interest and specialty, do you want to go into a bit more detail around one or two of the sessions? Curtis, maybe if we start with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, kind of starting from the last one I actually attended, which was one on Skype for Business integration in Horizon. It's a little bit of work that VMware and Microsoft have been working on jointly. It's very significant that there's been a lot of development work between Microsoft and VMware of late, a lot of pally stuff. So in terms of Skype for Business functionality, there's always been some capability, real-time audio video stuff in Horizon, and a few other attempts in the past to do the whole audio-visual side of Skype within a VDI environment. It's always been problematic, but this one's significant in that both Microsoft have licensed the protocol that underlies Skype to VMware to allow this plug-in to work in a specifically a view environment. Taking that step further, I also went to a session on Horizon Cloud, running that in a Microsoft Azure environment. Again, something telling that they are working very much closer with Microsoft than has been the case before. In this case, you've got the Horizon Cloud management backplane that's been around for a little while now, largely aimed at hosting virtual desktops in typically the VMware cloud side or on-premise. This now adds an extra feather to its bow. It's due for release imminently. And it is still somewhat in development. The early cut of it will be for purely remote desktop session hosting, but down the line VDI. But the way it deploys it is typically an elegant solution. It's very simple to deploy. Tick in, tick box, enter your Azure details, and off it pops through your desktop requirements. And it's as fully featured as the Horizon is elsewhere. So you've got those aspects. In terms of the VMware Fusion and Workstation session, so now they announced the next releases of those that are coming out. So we've got Fusion version 10. Yes, I seem to be skipping a release number there. Apparently it's to do with the 10th anniversary. And then Workstation 14. And they're using a more recent release of this. It's a more recent release of the software, some nice shiny new features there. So particularly if you're using Fusion, there's an API coming in so you can do some automation around that. Very much aimed at two specific use cases, both Fusion and Workstation. One is for the techies, so for example, they put some network tooling in there to be able to simulate latency, that sort of thing. But equally, they've emphasized concentration on the user interface for the business users. So if you're using Workstation Player in a Flex environment, it's got a nicer, cleaner interface and so forth. The integration is much more seamless, similarly with Fusion. So that's been quite valuable. The other key area that I went to two sessions on was around NSX and Horizon. I wrote a blog post for Extravirt a little time back discussing how you can integrate the whole Horizon suite in a solution with microsegmentation with NSX using Active Directory groups and so forth. And it would appear that I'm barking up the right tree as there are a number of customers starting to go down that route in conjunction with a number of partners and VMware themselves. So all things considered, actually really quite a useful time.
Cool. Excellent. Simon, what about you?
Yeah, so a couple of the sessions. So on the Monday, I went to a session which was called How to Build Software-Defined DR Practice with vSAN and SRM, which is quite a mouthful. But it was good. The reason I went along was I'd seen and heard lots of discussion in and around, utilizing SRM, which a lot of customers already had. And how that married up with vSAN, and vSAN being very much a hot thing for VMware at the moment. I was curious to see how, the best way to use SRM with vSAN. And they were covering aspects on the best way you can use it, the different options that you had, and the ways you couldn't use it and should use it. The fact that SRM supports vSAN stretch clusters, all these kinds of things. It was all good takeaways. It wasn't necessarily earth-shattering, but from the point of view of anyone that wants to architect that or wants to know if they can already use what they have from a license point of view, then they're very much covered. So that was a great session. On the other days, certainly the VROP session with Ewan, the Operationalize Your World, that was a really great session, and it's something that he's been doing with Sunny Dua for a while, and it's on his blog posts and all of this. And really, what he's doing there is he's using VROPs as a medium for IT admins to look at your infrastructure estate and behave as a service provider. Now, obviously, lots of people already are service providers, but they were looking at it more in a, if someone comes along and says, I want to do X, Y, or Z, you can justify that with sort of costings. And that's not even necessarily using VRB. It was more taking that whole approach about getting value. And in the same way, looking at it like if you're an admin or an infrastructure manager and you want to say to your boss, look, we're going to need more hosts, and here's the reasons why. And you're setting important things like SLAs, which I think for some people that's a bit of a challenge because they don't want to go to SLAs because that immediately means if they break them, all this kind of challenges. But he was very much challenging, I suppose, the preconceptions and also challenging people to step up their game on how to be an effective manager using the tool. And he was, demonstrating dashboards, demonstrating methodology that you would essentially get very much good value from it. And from the point of view of, one would hope, your boss is going to observe you doing all this fantastic work and you're nailing everything. And ultimately, the goal is to deliver excellent working standards for the virtual machines that you're providing services for, whether they're tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. So it's all about delivering good service and good value with the infrastructure you have or need. So that was a really, really great session. I mean, essentially, that was a day workshop that he kind of condensed into an hour. So there really wasn't enough time, but he did a great job doing it anyway. A few of the other sessions I went to, had a look at the Power CLI repo that Carl Rudy was giving a talk on. I'm very much trying to get into that sort of area, so I found that very interesting. Went along to a VRA 7 troubleshooting session, which was really, really good, actually. Broke down all of the elements from the point of view of troubleshooting from the ground up. You've got a problem with VRA. Okay, what component is it? These are the things you can look at and where to go to find this information out without immediately calling a GSS. Those are the sessions definitely that stood out for me, and yeah, it was good stuff.
Cool, thank you. So what about VMware on AWS and also sort of the integrated containers? Did you guys do much about that at all? Or go to any sessions on those?
Not really, actually. I actually planned to go to one of the AWS sessions, but it ended up clashing with the invitation I had.
Okay.
So I took the invitation that I had to go along. Sorry, there was one other session, which, again, is kind of leaning on more of a VROPS thing, but I got an invitation to do a design workshop with VMware along the lines of VROPS. And why that's a good thing is the whole impetus behind that was VMware looking to get feedback from people who were regular users of the product, and I believe they were doing this not just with VROPS but with other products.
Okay.
Getting feedback, whether it was positive or negative, on stuff that they were doing and stuffing that they had done. So it was great to see VMware engaging with people in a really direct manner and in a really positive way. So I'm really hopeful that we're going to see the products that we use really just getting improved more and more in a better way from the point of view of the users and the customers.
Awesome.
I think with respect to VMware on AWS, the main thing I did observe was on the main general session itself, there was quite a lot of dropping it into conversation in demonstration terms. So on Tuesday's general session was a particularly gimmicky demonstration with Pat Gelsinger wearing a VR headset and demonstrating integration of vSphere automation and being able to live migrate from an on-premises vSphere estate into AWS. So although it was a glitzy demonstration with respect to the VR side of matters, what it did show, however, was that flexibility, that the ability to live migrate and move workloads from an existing vSphere environment into a cloud environment seamlessly. And to that end, one of the significant product announcements was a feature called HCX, which is essentially a migration technology to provide VM portability. And that there was quite a bit of emphasis on that one, allowing different clouds to effectively shift workloads at scale, allowing that kind of portability that's often been an issue, particularly with respect to actually being able to do it in a live, minimum disruption manner. So some very clever stuff going on.
Yeah, I thought the HCX piece was one of the highlights of the keynote sessions. Certainly, a few of my peers have been saying that whoever kind of nails the ability to move between clouds in an efficient and seamless manner is really going to kill it. And that, to me, is a good indication that VMware is really looking at that and getting it right. At the end of the day, I can't see personally that the private clouds are just going to disappear. That doesn't mean they're irrelevant. I think there's the hybrid cloud models and people are looking at the public cloud. It all comes down to what's fit for purpose for each individual business. But the ability to move between them with minimum fuss with your workloads, that's the real trick. If you can pick and mix whatever you want for whatever suits your model and being able to just move it here, move it there, then you're onto a winner.
Yeah, that'd be impressive once that's working. That'd be really quite cool. Did you guys do anything around the OpenStack on VMware vCloud NFV at all?
Nope.
No, fair enough. No, that's fine.
Again, it was something that was pushed in one of the general sessions. There was a big push to get it out into the telcos. There was a lot of emphasis on Vodafone, for example, looking at that sort of thing. And using them as an example about telcos using OpenStack to deliver potentially moving into 5G services, that sort of thing. So it was interesting stuff from a development perspective.
Okay. And the integrated containers, you said you didn't go to either.
That's not something I mean, to be honest, that's not an area of interest that I had, and it's certainly not an area of specialism that I've got. So it was just so many sessions, you just had to pick what you could get to realistically. So there was one other announcement though that I don't know if it was specific to the Europe one, but they were talking more about the I forget what it was called now. Where is it? App Defense. Yes, that's it. That was cool. Very much talking about. Now there was this phrase that came up called cyber hygiene, which I'd not heard before, but apparently it's been around. I kind of chuckled at it, but they're very much talking about not just from an NSX point of view of microsegmentation, but is the application behaving the way it should? All this kind of stuff. And I know that they released a lot of information about that in the US, but that came up again in Europe. So that does look very, very interesting.
I think what impressed me about App Defense is its approach to it, looking at it from, if you consider how most antiviral solutions look at trying to detect bad behavior from a point of view of malware getting on the system, trying to flag that, whereas App Defense's approach looks at benchmarking or baselining a VM's good behavior, what it should normally be doing, and then tracking, well, if something out of the ordinary is happening, App Defense leaps in and does something with it, and then you can automate what response that is. A very clever way of essentially, rather than trying to fight all the infections to keep away the bad, it's more of a case of App Defense looking at it from the point of view of keeping the good and using that as its compliance. Very clever way of looking at things.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's quite a lot of work and integration with partner products. So they were reeling off a few names: Symantec, RSA, and a few others. They've got products that are already working to deliver integration into App Defense. So it's not a case of here's a product, come join us. They've done a lot of work with partners already on this.
Yeah, there was looking at there were a few other things that they were mentioning. I think on the second keynote, Wavefront, which is an analytics tool very much for DevOps. I haven't had a chance to properly look at it, but it's big, very much an enterprise tool. But one of the big, I suppose, numbers that was really impressive was their ability to consume up to 500,000 metrics a second, that's phenomenal. I mean, those kinds of numbers are just wow. So I'm kind of curious about that purely because I've, done a lot with VROPS and I don't know how the two compare. I mean, other than scale, I think it'll be interesting. And then the other bits and pieces is where you can see Clarity, the whole HTML5 piece that VMware have adopted for their whole stack. VRA is getting a Clarity makeover as well. So I think everybody's just going to be glad to see the back of the old stuff, certainly the back of Flash, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I actually went to a session on the vSphere client roadmap, and they are desperate for feedback. A lot of stuff around. One thing that they emphasised in the client roadmap session was they're trying to detach the vSphere web client interface, not just to deprecate the old Flash side of matters, but also to a point where they can do continual releases of it, even above and beyond vCenter. So you may get patches currently released as flings that you can implement on a regular basis, on the basis that you don't necessarily need to update the whole of vCenter just to update the interface. So they had quite a nice roadmap about what functionality is in the HTML5 interface now, where it's going, but they're desperate for feedback on, okay, so we've let's say, put vSAN in there. Have we got the user interface right? What would you like to see from that usable interface? The move to HTML5 has allowed them to look at it from a point of view. You can go to a particular page in that interface. You can take that URL, you can email that to somebody else, and so long as they then log into vCenter, they can go to that exact same URL and get the same look and feel, which with the Flash version you can't. So it's really quite interesting stuff how they're moving in that direction. That sort of flexibility you can push out. They're adding functionality all the time, but they wanted to get it out there rapidly, which is why the HTML5 interface came out, even though rather incomplete in the initial cut when 6.5 went GA. The amount of features they're ramping up and adding to it. So we've got things like Update Manager on the way and things like that. They are getting to a point now where it is actually quite a usable solution, and of course somewhat faster than the web interface.
What it shows for me, from VMware's point of view and the customers, is they're listening. They've now got the framework in place at VMware where they can move faster, react quicker, and it's all for the sake of a good customer end user experience of using their products. That whole model of being able to change, the front end, I suppose, or how something works to that respect, being able to roll out changes quickly. I use TweetDeck a lot, and I would say almost daily there's a new update. Now, I'm not going to suggest that that's the way it'll go for VMware, but that whole concept of, we've added this improvement, or whatever, and they can just add it without having to do a huge update and all this that's fantastic. That's the way to go. That's pretty much how a lot of other stuff works. But interestingly, I saw something which is slightly off of the VMworld track, but just tying that whole thing in. I saw an announcement about how Microsoft are doing something similar with a web interface for their servers. So they're kind of moving away from the MMC model, which I was amazed by, actually.
Wow.
A web interface for Microsoft servers, it was like, really? So I'm that kind of piqued my interest, but it shows that the industry is moving in that direction, and you can see they're taking it very, very seriously.
Well, when we were talking about the Horizon Cloud session earlier, one of the things that they pointed out there about this whole dynamic approach to interfaces and how to manage the updates to the solution, the management plane's user interface side, the control plane updated weekly now. The actual node side that users integrate with tends to be more quarterly, and you can schedule around that. But the actual control plane aspects that are non-invasive weekly, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I really like it. At the end of the day, it's all about giving an effective, good user experience so you can do your job quickly with minimum fuss. There's no question, for years, one of the biggest areas of people bitching and moaning is about, I'm not going to just use the Flash example, but that's a classic, where it just ended up hindering people from getting their job done quickly. Yeah, sure, you could use PowerShell, PowerCLI, those kinds of things to do it. But if the user interface is so poor, it kind of irritates and disillusions people. So when everybody saw the HTML5 thing land, not just for one product, but for many, it was like, woohoo, this is awesome. I'm very positive about it.
And as you said earlier, it shows a point that they're listening, which I think is a vital takeaway.
Well, yeah, certainly if I was a customer, a big customer that was spending, many millions of pounds on VMware products, and I felt like I was being listened to, even if from a small customer point of view, and I still felt that my feedback was being listened to, that's gold, Yeah.
So is it Clarity that's the open source interface from VMware? It's open source, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's worth checking out. But yeah, that's what VMware have adopted, yeah.
Cool. So do you think more people are going to start playing around with their own solutions and releasing their own sort of updates, or?
Possibly. I mean, there was interesting on the hackathon. One of the teams was doing something with Clarity. I can't remember specifically what it was, but yeah, because of the way it is, you can tinker it with yourself. Now, I don't know if it's permissible or you can, for instance, just thinking off the top of my head that you could go and modify the vSphere user interface to suit your own needs. I'm pretty sure that you would fall out of support rather rapidly. But if that's the kind of direction it's going, where you can modify stuff to your own whim, then at the end of the day, choice is king. That's how I view it.
Yep.
Well, VMware now have a certification program for the vSphere client, which is significant in itself. So coming back to that whole point, yes, you may not be able to customize it yourself as such, but they have a program. So if you do write as a partner company or as a software developer a plugin, you can go through a certificate program, and then it gets published through Solutions Exchange. So it's they are adding to that flexibility, but also giving that ease of use and that user interface improvements that may have been lacking of recent times.
A couple more questions then. So we've kind of covered this already in one way or another, but there was a lot of key announcements at this year's event. What are you most excited about?
From the keynote, HCX.
Okay.
I think in a general infrastructure sense, yes, for me, it was almost the final bit of the puzzle for hybrid cloud.
Okay.
That mobility.
One to keep an eye on then, definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. So overall, how would you sum up VMworld Europe 2017?
An exciting event, not necessarily for what's here now, but for what is imminent and what is happening.
And Simon?
Yeah, I think I would have to agree with Curtis. There's some good stuff coming. You can see there's progress. So, everybody's like, this is great, thumbs up. Certainly a lot of the bigger surprises were already announced at the US. So Europe didn't reveal anything big other than HCX. But yeah, for me, they're still going the right direction, and they're still making progress, and their focus is very much on the future and ultimately giving value to the customers.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, guys. Thanks for the time.
You're welcome.
No worries. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Find out more and listen to additional episodes on Cloud Insiders FM. Follow us on Twitter @Cloud Insiders and subscribe on iTunes. See you soon.